Hi, and welcome to another Java by example. Today we're going to look a bit more into parsing JSON documents and gathering data and putting data into data structures and so on. I have taken the liberty to flush out our simple POIs with some small getters and setters that will handle the different parsing of dates and handling strings and so on. We can look into these fast here. We have this address class with getters and setters for every string in the class. Not that fun to look at. We have the header class with a simple date formatter that will format string with a standard European date format until to a simple date. So you can both format invoice date back to a string, and you can set a string as a date. And if something goes wrong, we set the date to null and print a stack trace, so we know where the error occurred and why. So it's always good to get a stack trace in every case when you have an error. And then we could set the date directly if we have one, and we set the invoice number. The invoice is a bit more involved because here we have all the different parts of the document that we will put together. So we have all the rows, we have the two different addresses, shipping date and notes. And then we have the invoice row, and this is also just strings. And then we have two different number formats: a double, which is the standard in simple JSON, is the standard value for floating point values, is always doubles. But in some cases we also want to put prices, for instance, in a big decimal, so we can use the big decimal price in a calculation and be sure that we get all the roundings correct. So therefore we have some instantiation of big decimal here, and you can even instantiate with a string if you have one. The same goes for quantity. No, we don't have any string parsing for this double. I don't think we need it, but we will create it if we need it. And lastly, we have the shipping data with 2 dates and 4 strings that we have also made this conversion functions to. So now we're going to start up with our application here, where we have a document. In this case, we take the single JSON file and we will parse it to one single document. And last time we outputted the notes value from the document just to see that it works. But now we want to do something a little bit more involved, so I think we should create the invoice. So we take invoice here, and invoice is a new invoice, and we will create this with the document. So we will create a constructor in the invoice that will actually do the parsing of JSON. So we could have many different constructors that could parse different kinds of data. For instance, we could use a comma-separated values file to input data, and that will be another constructor. But it's always good to use constructors to create objects, because we have setters and getters, so we could actually change the class with the method inside of the class. If we want to, we could make those into private functions if we want the class to be immutable. And immutability is good because you know that the state of the object will not change during the execution, and therefore it's easier to test and easier to reason about. but in my case, I want to be able to change the document so everything is public, but I still think it's a good pattern to use the constructors if you have an object that actually describes or if you have an object with all the data that describes another object that you want to create, then why not use a constructor to set up everything? So this is the pattern I will use today. So we have this JSON object, which is a document that we put into Invoice. So we go into the Invoice, and here we create this public Invoice constructor that takes the JSON object. And in this document, there could be, contains ship address. So that would be a ship2. I guess we could open up this single JSON so we can see. We have ship2, bill2, invoice header, ship data, notes, and invoice rows. So let's concern ourselves with just these simple values. So let's close. See here, we can save that document. We close all the other tabs, and then we open up the invoice again. So we have just those two to think about at the moment. So here we have if the document contains ship2, so the document could actually not contain this values. I think it's good to always check if the JSON data actually has the value that you require. Either you just check for it and then do an operation, or you could check for it and say, if not, then throw an error, or inform the user that this isn't a valid document. But in our case, a valid document could have everything in it or nothing in it. So I'm just handling the different values that could occur in this constructor. So here we have all the values that could be in the document, and the easy one is notes, because that one will just be a simple string. So we say that we get a string notes, and notes in our simple document will be the same as the notes. And we could also say that the header, that's not a string, but that's another object, JSON object. I wonder, we could check if it's always good to have the documentation of the simple object, so you know what the different application or the different methods are. Let's see here, JSON object. Yeah, it's just a simple map, so it will return whatever is in the map. So see here, we take overview and we go into frames just to see if we have a JSON value. Those are simple as well. Yeah, so I guess that the JSON object will return just something from the map, and the map will contain anything could be doubles, it could be strings, and so on. So that's easily checked. See here, document, just get the invoice header, and that should be another JSON document. So we cast it to a JSON object. And in this case, we could also, we should probably do something like this, that where we say this getter gets an object of any kind. So this is the voice header object, and this we should check if the invoice header object is an instance of JSON object. Then it's safe for us to create our new header. I just realized that we don't have any header information in the invoice. That seems a bit strange. So we have our invoice header object where we create a new header. So let's fix that. We of course need a private variable that is header. So then we can set the header there. And then we just have the same pattern for all the other data that is a single amount of values. So we have the header data, we have the bill to data, the ship to data, and the shipping data. And in this case, where we have the exact same kind of function and checking and so on, then it's a good point to create a new function, right? So here we will clarify this by saying that we want to get a JSON object, and in our case we should get see here, get JSON object from invoice, from documents, we can say. That could be a bit more expressive if we like, but as per usual, the hard part with programming is to find the correct names for different parts of your program. So my naming might not be a good one. So if you have a better name, please leave a comment, and we could change it up and have a different name for this function. I think this exercise should be interactive, so I really hope that if you have any suggestions for anything that we could make better, then please leave a comment. So here we have a string key, and then we just copy everything that we have here, almost, and we will have some of the code removed. We don't know what kind of object we should create. That we could do with some generics, but I think it's cleaner to just get a JSON object and then assign each one of them. So here we have a simple object, and the simple object, if that's a case of JSON object, then we will return the JSON object. Else we return nil, and then we will have to remember that if we have null or nil in our constructors, then we don't want the object to have any values in it. So I guess we just check for nil, and then the object will be blank. That's a decent solution, I suppose. So now where we can have this check as well inside here, so we don't need to duplicate that information every time. So, and then we use our key as the get and contains key, and in this case we can replace a lot of code. You should write your code. I read a paper that said that you should write your code in a way that it's easy to remove code later on. And in our case, we have written code that is quite easy to just remove a lot of code that is not valid anymore. So in our case, we could just say that we want to create a new header object like that. And then we want to create a billing address and set that to bill to. We want to have a shipping address and set that value to ship to. We want to have a ship data and set that value to shipping data. See now, I think that's the 4 implementations that we need. So now we have actually solved the issue with everything in this class except for the invoice rows. Those come in multiple values. So we have an invoice rows key in the document that is actually an array. So this array will contain one or more objects. So in this case, we will write some code to say that if document contains invoice rows, and if document get, we do the same way we did before. We create a object, and in this case we have a better name for this because we know that it could be a simple invoice rows object. So this case we can call it a simple invoice rows object, just so we know that that is not the real invoice rows object, because we need to do the instance of. In this case, it's not a JSON object, it's a JSON array we want to cast this to. And then when we have a JSON array, we could simply use the JSON array, say that we want a new object of some kind inside this JSON array, and this we could call the simple invoice row object, just to shortening it a bit. And then we can use this nifty array syntax where you can just loop over an array of objects and use its iterator in a for loop and get each object of that kind. And then we need to take our rows object and add all the different rows to this. So then we can say new row object and put in our simple invoice object. And then we no, that's no good. Yes, let's see here. The part we have here that not any good is that we can't add a row value that is nil. So we don't want this function to return a nil row. It could return an empty row, but then we have to actually do now I think the nicest way to do this is to create a function to call add row and give it a simple row object, just so we can stop the nestling of a class. It's often when you come into a situation where you feel that now I have gone a bit far down the structure. We are already in a tab index of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have indented 5 times. And it's not good to indent too much, then the code will be less readable. And if you have a good naming convention on your functions, those could help you too, and you could separate your concerns a bit by just using more functions. Too many functions can make your models very strict and very hard to change up and work with, but some objects is always good to have. So here we have an object. This is a simple invoice object. We continue that naming convention, and here we have to check if this simple invoice object is an instance of a simple JSON object. And in that case, we could create a new JSON object. We call invoice row. And see here, I just do the casting from JSON object on the simple JSON invoice row. So that's now we have a JSON object, and if we have this JSON object now, I think it's safe now that we have checked. Then we could do rows add on this JSON object. Yeah, we have to instantiate a new invoice row, of course. So then we will, only if there is a JSON object, or if this simple invoice object is a JSON object of that type, then we will add it to our list of invoice row objects. So then we will create a new invoice row. So now we have done that. We could actually say that we want to add the invoice rows. So we move this for loop inside of here as well. So might be a bit nicer. Nah. In this case, it wasn't that much more code, so I changed my mind. You're always fine to change your mind. It wasn't that deep, and it's not that many steps between each, so this could be readable. If you think this it's not readable and want to change it anyway, please give me a comment and we will change it later. But for brief brevity, we will have it this way now. So now we haven't created any of these objects yet. We just created the invoice object, and we don't have any of the constructors for the different other classes. So I think we should create all those. Let's see here, address block, address JSON address, and we go to the header. Here we create the header with the JSON header. We go to the invoice row. Here we create the invoice row with the JSON invoice row. And lastly, we go to the shipping data. Here we create that constructor as well. So now we have each constructor for each class. Then we need to go here and see that we actually have all the required imports. Let's see here. In this case, we just need a JSON object, and header, I believe, we also just need that one. In invoice, we need the array as well. And in the row, we need a JSON object. And shipping data, we need a JSON object. So now we can go and try to compile this package. Let's see here. I forgot the semicolon somewhere, of course, in the invoice class. See which row, 37. Here, of course. It's always good to learn to read the different error messages. So here we have the problem that in invoice it can't find the symbol contains. Okay, so then we need to check in this and see what we should use for a map. Doesn't map. Oh, not a good search phrase. Map should have contains, right? Contains key, of course. So let's go back here, and then we have to change up contains key, contains key, and contains key. So let's see if this will compile. We have two more errors. For each is not applicable and can't find symbol get string. Did I use get string in invoice? Even though I didn't. Ah, I did. So here, if nodes exist, then we just cast it to a string. That will hopefully work fine. And not iterable over a JSON array. I haven't casted it to a JSON array yet. Simple mistake. There we go. Yay! And it compiles. So now I believe that if we run this, we have actually done some parsing of the document. We haven't done any viewing of the document, so we don't know what's in the document yet, but just for some output we can do a simple system out print line and do the invoice get notes, and that function should, after compiling, and it didn't compile, of course, because I'm forgetting semicolons. That will give us, I hope you like this appetizer. So now I think we have done some of the more hard parts of the JSON parsing. I will, from this video to the next one, I will go and fill out these constructors with the parsing of the different strings and other objects we have here, because that's perhaps not that fun to see. It's more of the same. I will go through those in the next video. But I hope that you liked this video. Please share this video with your friends. Leave a nice comment. Give me some feedback. Say what I can change up, and where you think I have done something wrong. And if you want more of this kind of content, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.